Como les había dicho, estoy muy contento porque hoy tengo a un cantante que he tenido el sueño de algún día entrevistarlo. Nunca pensé que se daría porque por lo general se me da con gente local de Estados Unidos, por ahí de Europa, pero rara vez se me da por alguien de Australia. Y hoy tengo a alguien que es un ícono, no solo una persona común de Australia, una banda más, sino un ícono de la música Aussie. Ha arrancado en los 70 junto a AC/DC, ahí un poquito más tarde han llevado junto a esa banda la bandera del rock Aussie. Tienen 9 discos grabados. Su vocalista se llama Angry, es vocalista, aparte compositor, personalidad de televisión y actor. Ahora le voy a preguntar qué onda. Angry,
Oh,
¿cómo estás? How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. And if I just got to the my own interpretation as well as being an actor, was that correct? Your last part of the
Actually,
introduction?
yeah. I
Yeah.
was going to ask you, what kind of actor are you? Are you like a porn actor?
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story about that. I have never considered I've done 6 films. In all but 2 of them, I only had like minor parts. I was the husband of a wife in one, and she was one of the main characters, and the husband was basically in the background, inconsequential, of not great importance. But of course, the most high-profile movie that I've been involved in was the third Mad Max film, and Thunderdome, which of course starred in the female role Tina Turner, and that was the last
Movie.
film
Yeah.
that Mel Gibson
Yeah. Yeah, the last
starred
one.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, he disappeared somehow. And
Well, yeah, there's a very interesting story there, but it's complicated.
do you want to facilitate it?
He wanted, he wanted to do the part, and
Your part.
no, he wanted to continue as Mad Max
Okay.
after Thunderdome, and without too much of a wordy explanation, his management, because he and George Miller have a very close personal relationship, because Mad Max helped Mel Gibson become a star, and because he became a star, it brought a lot of attention towards any cinematic experience that George Miller was involved in from that point on. And because George was very well known here in Australia, but not so much in America. And the fact that Mel went to America and became such a big star very quickly, it brought a lot of attention on George Miller as a writer, director, visionary as far as film went. Yeah.
Good. Bueno, estaba hablando un poquito de Mad Max, ¿ok? Lo que estuvo, que fue la última película que hizo, que estuvo con Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson quería continuar haciendo Mad Max. Fue la película que lo llevó al estrellato. Le voy a preguntar un poquito, es una persona espiritual, a ver qué me dice. I read that you are a spiritual person. Tell me about that.
Yes, it started at a very young age for me, and like
Because having groupies is not being too spiritual.
that was my research into the sexual tension and relationship between the two esoterically opposing principles or dynamics, which is male and female. And yes, folks, there are only 2. Anyway, having said that, so I did a lot of research in the old days, as most young men and young women, for that matter, as it turns out, the promiscuity within rock and roll, to do with sexual relationship with the opposite sex, is not confined to males. Of course, I have many friends now, after all these years, female players, musicians, and or singers here in Australia, and also internationally. And we all have that in common, where we've taken advantage of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll dynamic. And yeah, I by way of my mother is a God rest her soul. When I say her soul, she's still alive, but 5 or 6 years ago we lost her to dementia, so she no longer lives in this dimension, in this plane, so to speak. She's definitely somewhere else. But I struggle with her Roman Catholicism as a child, because fundamentally I struggle with it because it kept her, the vows she took in marriage, and her religion per se, kept her trapped in a domestic violence situation, which I could not reason when I was younger. Of course, I understand the faith that she kept, and it kept her strong, it kept her resilient. So I understood the principle of the spiritual connection, and my connection to the divine is not through a structured, dogmatically practiced religion, but it's to realizing that, in biblical terms, this is my interpretation.
Yes.
In biblical terms, when it is written that we were created in our Creator's image, and interpretation being what it is loosely translated from God created. And there are some interpretations that say the Creator created. Well, the Creator, in my way of thinking, is the divine inspiration, is the continual cycle of life. And so I prescribe to that I am part of, as we all are. I totally believe this. Not only are we physically attached to the natural realm, but we are spiritually attached to the inspiration that created all that we know.
Right, right. Well, I was asking you this because I'm curious. I've seen, maybe it's related with spirituality, but I remember I've seen several of pictures of you that everybody's holding you. Maybe some kind of spiritual cults that I want to join, but if there's some chicks also. Well, what is everybody loves you? I mean, you're so. What is the reason of the holding you?
I think whether it was by design, and yes, it was. What we were trying to do, what we were trying to create, was part of the esoteric language, the language of how spiritualism, or the spirituality that drives us, that is our life force, our passion. And very few people get involved in music without, it's like when they say, oh, a doctor, it's a chosen profession. Well, all, if not most, professions are chosen through a passionate response within yourself. So I think that all musicians come together from responding to something from within, deep within their soul, and then they want to create something. Artists through the years, sculptors, painters, poets, playwrights, have always answered this call to create. And one of the things that we we tried to do. There were several aspects to Rose Tattoo. Rose Tattoo, it derives its name from a novel, but the symbolic language in that novel is the balance, the precarious but carefully uh, uh, beautiful balance between male and female. Rose being infinitely associated with femininity, and indeed down through the ages, Rose has been always associated with femininity. And the
Yeah.
tattoo, um, not that women historically have not been tattooed, but way back with the origins of tattooing, it goes back to like the Celts were heavily tattooed. Many basic tribes, if you like, the Scottish. It was predominantly through that area, through Britain and Europe, when they were cross-pollinating to become the British people, the European people, defining themselves. They had a common thing with tattooing, and it was a very masculine thing. And one of the reasons that they heavily tattooed themselves was to protect themselves against injury. So they believed that it gave them some sort of spiritual armor.
Yeah.
And so that's the origins of tattooing. So Rose Tattoo is male and female joined together to become one, which is the way God, the divine creational process, fully intended it, and that hasn't changed. Within our imagery, and Peter was very when he formed the band and he conceived the band as an idea and a physical musical force. He was a very deep person, and he knew the importance of symbolism. He knew that Jung wrote about it, Man and His Symbols, about how important the symbols that come from our unconscious, our subconscious, and the way that they manifest themselves or are manifested in the natural realm are very important. So those covers, and you're one of the few that's been, you were able to see that, you were able to
Thanks.
be affected by something that looks at it. It looks just like, okay, that's a fairly extravagant picture of a rock and roll band. Because when those covers first came out, we're talking about late 70s, early 80s. One of the reasons that Rose Tattoo had the effect that it's had on other very bands that became very famous because of the imagery and the music, was because of the reasons. Those covers say that we're all brothers. If we're not connected at the physical and the soul level, we are not going to produce. All great bands have that. I mean, you have a look back at some of the great rock and roll bands. There are photos of most of us where there's a lot of physicality.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaning on one another. They've got arms around one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of consciously or unconsciously saying to the person who is the viewer, we are as one.
Beautiful.
There is power there. And that's the message that in the last few years of our life, because in 2026, Rose Tattoo as a name will be 50 years old, and that's it. That's finished. We'll finish at 50 years. So we have only a few years left. But the Rose Tattoo will lyrically, performance-wise, we will try to reestablish in the minds of the people who love our music and who follow us as a band that it's the unity that's most important. It's the solidarity. It's if we don't stand together as human beings, we can't possibly save the things that make us beautiful, and that is compassion for one another, understanding, tolerance, because the politics of today are seeking, and they're succeeding in dividing us over
Yeah.
racial issues, sexual issues. I mean,
In any way.
you know, in any way that they possibly can, because they realize that if we are divided, we're easy to crush.
Yeah.
When we stand together, we are the strongest force from nature, because we are nature. So that's going to be our message for these next few years is, brothers and sisters, keep the faith.
This is amazing. This is
Hold
amazing.
strong. Yeah.
Amazing. Honestly, I'm stunned. I didn't know what to expect, you know. I interview many artists, great people, some people that are very professional in the music, some are more spiritual or more conscious. And I appreciate what you said. I'm curious, have you ever played in Latin America?
No.
No?
And
Okay.
we hope to fix that.
We gotta work on that.
We gotta work on that, because we have had invitations over the years, and for one reason or another, our management have not been able to. Okay, in recent times, the last 3 or 4 years, we have booked tours through America, through the Northern America,
Recently,
United States.
yeah.
And we've not been able to do it. Well, one main reason, once our drummer, Paul DeMarco, he was in jail, in prison for 6 years. And during that time, we had other players. So we were still looking at trying to tour, even though since he came back, everyone thinks, oh, it's because he's a convicted criminal. That's why we can't get a visa. But it's only part of the only person who can't get a visa is himself. But the band has getting passage visas to go into the northern states of America has become almost impossible. I mean, we're still working on it, but astronomical costs. And every time, it's like any bureaucracy, you answer every question on the paper. You tick all the boxes. Then you send the paper, and then they send you another paper.
Yeah.
And it says
it's part of the system.
Yes. But I don't know, quite honestly, if we could bypass and come just straight to South America. I would take the opportunity, and our management said, quite honestly, I'll be honest. I mean, why wouldn't we be honest? We're now establishing a friendship.
Yeah.
And the basis has to be honesty, mutual respect, etc. And our management have consistently said, but we're not going to make money. And me being my age and belonging to what we call old school, so I'm an incurable romantic when it comes to our industry. I say, yeah, but it's not about the money. And they go, yeah, but we have to pay bills. And I go, okay, as long as we don't lose money,
we're gonna get you to Argentina.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap it up. And there's anything else you wanna say to your fans in Argentina, Latin America, everywhere in the world?
Hold the faith. That's become my catch cry for many years now, because I have seen the trials and the tribulations on a personal level that people go through, and I foresaw some of the things that are now coming home to be what we call the normal, or the new world order, if you like. And I reject and I resist. And I think the people that are passionately involved in music, and it's always been this way. I just recently saw on the plane, we went to a few weeks ago, we went over and did the Monsters of Rock cruise through the Caribbean out of Orlando, and that 2 weeks. And on one of the movies that I watched on the plane was the Baz Luhrmann movie, Elvis Presley. And I was just tried to keep an open mind because I'm such an Elvis Presley fan, particularly the early Elvis, you know, the Elvis that established Elvis Presley, like, and helped launch rock and roll until he got distracted. But it's a very, very good movie. It's a beautiful movie in a sense that it tells with great sensitivity the story of a man that was born to be great. And the very thing, and this is the amazing contradiction, if you like, about life. He was born to greatness because he had this, and in the early part of the movie, he's in a church with you know, brown, well, I call them brown people, but people call them black, but they're not black, they're brown. But African Americans, they call them in America. And he's in this church and they're singing gospel. And there's a moment in the movie, and it's brilliantly portrayed as a scene where he looks up, and it's like when a person receives the Holy Ghost, when a person receives that inspiration, when a person has that experience, no matter what it's associated with, and it can be many things. It can be the birth of a child. It was in my case. You know, I was a completely fucked up person, and my daughter was born. Not something that we planned, or not something, but the divine, in its wisdom, sometimes, most times, says, "This is what you need, not what you want, but this is what you need." And to save my life, to save my soul, I think the divine knew, well, I know the divine knew nothing was going to save me apart from another human being. And so the divine gave me our daughter. And I realized then that I had to change my life, to be a better father, but to be a better human being. Nice. But anyway, having said that, that's my personal journey. And I think now, in our life experience, in our short history of the last 300 or 400 years, now more than ever, we need to realize that we are brothers and sisters, and we do need to resist the evils that are taking over our world. So enjoy the music, brothers and sisters. Dance to the music, sing to the music, but deep within your heart and soul, come to know why the music exists.
Thank you, Angry. Thank you. And there's more questions that I have, but we're going to do a revenge in some point.
Right.
If you want to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We got to work on this thing. We got to work on getting us down there.
Totally. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Angry.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, brother. And I am so glad that, because I believe solidly in the principles that all manner of things are meant to be, not in a preordained sense, not someone mysteriously living in the clouds writes it all down and says, well, this is your history, this is going to happen. But we connect out of a love out of a common love. And it's music, it's humanity, it's the common cause because we believe in something greater than ourselves, and it's brought us together, and we must treat that as a significant thing, as we must treat it with the respect and the affection that it actually deserves. So I'm grateful too that we've made this connection.
Thank you.
And I am personally thrilled that you looked at those ugly people on the cover of those albums and saw something beautiful there.
Thank you. Bueno, él fue Angry. Si quieren, pueden ir a roasted2.com.au, roasted2.au, y ahí tienen todo, ahí tienen para comprar de todo. Así que nos vamos despidiendo, ¿ok? Y don't leave yet, ¿ok, Angry? Thank you for your time, ¿ok?
Absolutely, brother.